Hello, ladies and gentlemen. John O'Keefe, present and accounted for, here in the beautiful Monte La Salle National Forest in southeast Utah. I have chosen a beautiful spot below our campground. We are currently in a place called Devil's Canyon Campground, and I am here in Devil's Canyon. I don't find it to be terribly devilish. I will state definitely that some lightning strikes have come through this area. If you have not seen the video on lightning strikes and their effect on ponderosa pines, you might want to find that one. Check out some video that I had in the same outfit. I have been on a little bit of a hike down the water trail of this canyon, that which carved it. Behind me, you will see sandstone. You will be able to see that which the water passeth down into this space. We are in the land of the Pueblo. We are in the land of the ancient Puebloans, those who lived in Pueblos, as well as the, I guess, the ancestors of our Hopi, Navajo, and Zuni brethren and sisters. Although I am not reading a desert story, I am living the native experience out here. I feel very connected to everything that we've been reading about, the idea of our relationship with nature, our ideas and our give and take with nature, our responsibility to thank it, just like Etienne did when he killed the she-bear earlier. According to all of the readings and all of the warnings of the National Park Service, there are definitely bears and raccoons and squirrels and ants and, well, I've seen deer out here while I've been on adventure, and hummingbirds. Definitely seen some hummingbirds. Lots of different kinds of birds are flying around. Because of the recent rains in this area, there has been some nice wildflowers, and I am really, really thrilled to be here. I'm excited to be reading with you again. Of course, am on a hike, and so I'm in the middle of a hike. I've got some ponderosa pines in our background, but I need to get our book. I need to get ready. So I have my Sign of the Beaver book that I have with me at almost all the time, because who knows when you're going to get stuck someplace and have to entertain yourself for a period of time. I've got my journal and a pen. I've already put on my sunscreen and I have my water. So I can put my backpack down and get ourselves started for our reading for today. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, we have been through some pretty amazing experiences in these last few chapters. We have seen our two main characters, Matt and Etienne, kill a bear, not for sport, but to protect themselves. We have been invited into a Penobscot village in order to celebrate the killing of the bear and the bringing of that food into the village. We saw what the village looked like on a regular day. Matt returned to his cabin and began practicing a lot of the things that Etienne has taught him. Matt then heard on turtle ground a particular dog that was hurt and stuck in one of those steel traps that we've heard a few things about. Matt went against the rules, ran back to the tribe, found Grandma, as well as Etienne's sister, Marie. So, we're at a point right now where I have one major question. What about those notches on the stick? What about the notches that are coming on that stick? And what I'd like to do is I would like to begin reading, and we'll be together for chapters 19, chapter 20. We'll see where we're at that point, all right? Ladies and gentlemen, chapter 19 of Elizabeth George Spears' book, Sign of the Beaver, chapter 19. Grandmother says you come to village today, Etienne announced 2 days later. That's kind of her, Matt answered, but my hand is just about healed. It doesn't need any more medicine. Not for medicine. Matt waited uncertainly. My grandmother, very surprised white boy go long way for Indian dog. Etienne explained. She say, you welcome. So once again, Matt crossed the river into the Indian stockade. This time, though the dogs barked at him and children stared and giggled, he did not feel so much like a stranger. Sackness held out a hand of welcome. Etienne's grandmother did not exactly smile, but her thin lips were less grim. Behind her, Etienne's sister smiled but did not speak. The old woman dipped a clamshell ladle into a kettle and filled 3 bowls with a stew of fish and corn, then drew back while Etienne and Sackness and Matt ate their meal in silence. Neither she nor Marie ate till the men were finished. Pause. Sometimes this is a little strange to our ears. I noticed that the 3 men, or the males, had the fortune of being able to eat first. You notice that Marie and grandmother paused, stepped back, and did not eat until the men were finished. There's a part of my heart that kind of freaks out a little bit about that, due to the fact that I find equality in my culture to be very important. In this case, it seems as though this is a cultural expectation. And so I don't want to be offensive to them, but I want to be acknowledge the fact that they're a little bit different, that the men eat first and women eat second. After the meal, Etienne did not hurry him away. He rather grandly played host and led Matt about the village. He was amused when Matt kept stopping every few feet to watch what the women were doing. Matt was filled with curiosity. He knew well enough that Etienne was scornful of the squaw work the white boy had to do, but Etienne didn't have to worry about what he was going to eat next day. There were so many things Matt wanted to learn. He observed carefully as 2 women pounded dry kernels of corn between 2 rounded stones. We talked a little bit about that in the pestle and mortar. Catching the coarse flour on a strip of birch bark. He marked how they spread berries on bark so that the sun dried them hard as pebbles. He admired the baskets made of a single strip of birch bark, bent and fastened at the corners so tightly that the water could be boiled inside. I must remember that, he resolved. I could do that myself if I tried. For a time, Etienne good-naturedly answered his questions. Finally, he grew impatient of squaw work. He led Matt toward a cluster of boys who squatted in a circle in a dirt pathway, absorbed in some kind of noisy game. The boys widened their ring to make room for 2 more, and Matt crouched awkwardly on his heels to watch them. One after the other, they were shaking 6 smooth bone discs in a wooden bowl and tossing them out onto the ground. Each disc was marked on one side with a band of red paint. When each boy had had a turn, the one who had thrown the most discs to land painted side up was proclaimed the winner. And with much gloating, he collected from each of the others a number of small sticks. So they're kind of gambling. One of the things that I notice about this that I want to pause for is I could make this game. This is a disc game. So you have a disc, something small, something round, something that you could flip, like a checkers or something, and you could put a little white mark on one side of it. And then, however many people are playing, you get to flip them out and see how many you can get to face painted side up. Then you and whoever you're playing with have to give you something, so it's kind of like gambling. Then they handed the bowl to Matt. His luck was good. 5 of the discs showed red bands, and with laughter and clowning, the others piled up before him a heap of sticks. So what was so exciting about this simple game, he wondered, to cause so much shouting? The bowl went rapidly around the circle. The sticks kept changing hands, and presently he had the answer. One of the boys had no sticks left to pay. With a mocking groan, he unclasped from his arm a wide copper band and tossed it to the winner. So that's it, Matt thought silently. Sooner or later, I'm bound to lose too, and when I do, what will they expect for me to forfeit? Forfeit, to give up. He did not have long to wait. At his next turn, every one of the discs landed blank side up. Ruefully, he handed over the last of the sticks he had won. There was a gleeful shout, and then they waited. What do I have? He thought desperately. Nothing in his pocket but his jackknife, and his very life depended on that knife. Then the boy nearest him reached over and jerked roughly at the sleeve of his shirt. Matt pretended not to understand, and the boy tugged harder. Two of the others got to their feet, plainly ready to tear the shirt from his back. Etienne made no move to help him. Grimly, he pulled the shirt over his head and tossed it to the winner. It served him right, he supposed. His father had always forbidden him to gamble, but what was he going to do without a shirt? It was the only shirt he had. Ha ha! Matt decided to get into a game. This is a life lesson right now, guys. Mr. O's life lessons for today. Here's one of them. 1. Know what game you're getting into. Know the rules before you get into that game. 2. You need to know whether or not you're willing to lose what you have in the game. So this is a good idiom. The idiom is you've got skin in the game. Skin in the game. The whole point of that is that if you've got skin in the game, what are you going to give up if you lose? Skin. You got to know what you're going to give up. So that's why I don't gamble very much. Or I've learned plenty that I'm no good at it. So he has now just given up his own shirt. He is shirtless. Now Etienne put an end to the game. He leapt to his feet and produced from nowhere a soft ball made of deerskin. Instantly, the others raced off in all directions and came back carrying thin sticks. One of these was thrust at Matt. It was a curious sort of bat, light and flexible with a wide, flat curve at the tip. Forgetting his humiliation, Matt suddenly grinned. With a bat in his hand, he could hold his own with any Indian. The boys back in Quincy could have told them that. Eagerly, he joined in the scramble of choosing sides. Hold on a minute. I got to go back, and I have to see the description of what the bat looks like. It was a curious sort of bat, light and flexible, with a wide, flat curve at the tip. So that means it kind of goes down and around like a small J, and the J kind of has a cup to the bottom of it. My brain is now kind of thinking a little bit about maybe it's kind of like lacrosse. We have a long, thin, light stick with something at the bottom to hold on to. We have a soft ball made of deerskin. So we've got a ball and we've got these bats with a little bit of a curve. So now I'm going to try to put this game together in my head. That's what readers have to do, guys. That's what readers do. But never had he played a game like this, so fast and merciless. The ball could not be touched by hand or foot. It was kept flying around through the air by the sticks alone. If it fell to the ground, some player scooped it up with the tip of his bat and sent it spinning again. So it's a lot like lacrosse. The Indian boys were bewilderingly, wow, that's a big word. The Indian boys were bewilderingly quick and skillful. Okay, I read it a few times. This is what you have to sometimes do when you come to a word that you don't understand. The Indian boys were bewilderingly quick and skillful, and they wielded their bats with no heed for each other's heads, and certainly not for Matt's. It was no accident, he knew, when an elbow jabbed suddenly into his right eye. These boys were putting him to the test. Ignoring the blows that fell on his head and shoulders, Matt swung grimly at the whirling ball, missing it over and over, but sometimes feeling the satisfying thwack of a bat against leather. He was thankful now that he had no shirt. If only he could be wearing a breechcloth instead of tight English breeches. Breeches. Word. Pants. Breeches. He wishes he was wearing a breechcloth. Breeches. Breechcloth. Breech is in both words. Breech must be the section of our bodies that we want to cover with clothes. Ha ha! Breechcloth. Breeches. I get it now. Okay, cool. But there was no time for worrying about his clothes. Finally, by pure luck, he sent the ball into the hole in the ground that marked the goal. Out of breath and dripping, he grinned at his side generously as his side generously cheered him and whacked his sore shoulders. Then, with a whoop, they raced all together through the stockade gate, down to the river, and went leaping like frogs into the water. Matt floated face down, grateful for the coolness against his burning cheeks. All at once, a brown arm circled his neck and dragged him under. Squirming free, he seized a black head in both hands, and the two boys went down together. They came up gasping and grinning. Suddenly, Matt was enjoying himself. It was almost as good as being back in Quincy again. The sun had reached the tops of the pines when he went to Etienne's cabin to bid grandmother goodbye. She stood studying him, and he flushed under her sharp eye. He must look a sight, he knew. There was a lump as big as an egg on his forehead, and his right eye was probably turning black. She turned and spoke a few stern words to Etienne. With a shrug, he went out and returned a few moments later, carrying Matt's shirt. "They played trick on you," he grinned. "Joke." "Some joke," Matt retorted. He wanted to refuse the shirt, but he couldn't afford to be proud about his only shirt. Resentfully, he pulled it over his head. Before they left, the old woman gave each of them a slab of cake heavy with nuts and berries. I'm getting hungry. Her eyes, as she looked at her grandson, were warm and bright. Matt was minded how his mother had often looked at him, pretending to be angry with him, but not able to hide that she was mighty fond of him just the same. Suddenly, he felt a sharp stab of homesickness. Outside the cabin, Etienne's dog was waiting. He limped after them to the river. When Matt stepped into the canoe, the dog jumped in after him and settled down only a few inches from Matt's knees. He had never willingly come so close to Matt before. Etienne noticed and commented, "Dog remember." Was that possible? Matt wondered. Could a dog caught in a trap, even though he snapped out in pain and fear, sense that someone was trying to help him? Could the dog remember that terrible ordeal at all? You couldn't read a dog's mind, but just possibly, a dog could read a white boy's mind. Very slowly, Matt reached down and laid his hand on the dog's back. The dog did not stir or growl. Gently, Matt scratched behind the ragged ear. Gradually, against the bottom of the canoe, the thin tail began to thump in a contented rhythm. So he has just made relationships with the dog. At the opposite bank, Etienne watched Matt climb out of the canoe, but he did not follow. Apparently, this was as far as he intended to go. As Matt hesitated, he lifted his hand. It occurred to Matt that this might be a compliment. Without saying a word, Etienne was acknowledging that Matt could now find his own way through the forest. Returning his wave, Matt set out with confidence that he did not quite feel. It was growing dark. He would have to walk fast or he would not be able to mark the signs along the trail. He was very tired. The bump on his forehead was throbbing. He was sore from head to toe, and his eye was almost swollen shut. But to his surprise, deep inside, Matt felt content. Was it because Etienne's dog had finally trusted him? No. More than that had changed. He had passed some sort of test. Not by any means with flying colors. He had plenty of bruises to remind him of that. But at least he had not disgraced Etienne. He felt satisfied, and for the first time since his father had left him, he did not feel alone in the forest. Do you hear that? Do you remember way back in chapter 11, when all of a sudden we had that desire for Matt to learn or get or achieve Etienne's respect? It is here now that he has achieved that, right? He's getting respect from Etienne. Chapter 20. For the next few days, Matt waited eagerly. Early in the morning, he finished his chores so that at a word from Etienne, he would be ready to set out for the Indian village again. But Etienne did not come. Matt resolved to be patient, but day by day, his new confidence began to slide away. Perhaps he had only imagined that he had passed a test. In Etienne's eyes, perhaps he had failed. Do you think that? It was a week before Etienne came, and the moment Matt saw him, he knew that there would be no invitation. The Indian boy was solemn and unsmiling, looking more like his grandfather than ever before. He sat staring at the book Matt opened, his mind plainly miles away. He did not want to listen to a story. He seemed to have forgotten the words that he had learned the week before. "I not remember," he said impatiently. "My grandfather teach me many thing." "What sort of things?" Etienne did not answer. "Time of hunt comes soon," he said finally. Matt felt suddenly hopeful. Perhaps it was not any failure of his own that had caused Etienne to stay away. Every year, Etienne had told him, when the leaves had fallen from the trees, the Indians hunted the caribou and the great moose. Whole families moved away from the village to follow the trail of the bigger animals. Matt knew that more than anything in the world, Etienne longed to hunt with the men. He could imagine now how Etienne must have been staying close to his grandfather these last days, trying to be useful to prove that he was fit to be one of them. "I not come tomorrow," Etienne added. "Maybe long time." "You're going on the hunt?" Matt tried hard to keep the envy out of his voice. Etienne shook his head. "I go find my Manitou." Manitou. Manitou. I'm going to look around to see if there's some help here. "I go find my Manitou." Matt was puzzled. Was Manitou another word for moose? "Maybe you call spirit," Etienne explained. "All Indian boy must have Manitou. It's time for me." Oh, spirit animal. Let's hear what he explains before I start putting my brain in. "How can you find a spirit?" For a moment, Matt thought this was one of Etienne's odd jokes, but he had never seen his friend so serious. Did you hear that? He had never seen his friend so serious. Authors do not make mistakes. That word is chosen specifically for the fact that Matt now considers Etienne friend. How can you find a spirit? For a moment, Matt thought this was one of Etienne's odd jokes, but he had never seen his friend so serious, even troubled. "My grandfather teach me," Etienne repeated. "Manitou come to you in dream." Then, seeing that Matt was not laughing, that he really wanted to understand, Etienne went on, trying to explain in his clumsy English a mystery that could not truly be explained at all. "My ears need to come up more now. I need to listen to this. Every Indian boy must have a Manitou," he said, "before he could take his place as one of the men of his family. He had to find it for himself. No one can help him. His grandfather had been training him for many days. He had had to learn many things. Now he must go make the test." He would go out into the forest alone. First, he would make special preparations. He would bathe himself carefully and take a special medicine to make him clean inside and out. Then he would go far into the forest and build himself a wigwam of branches. He would stay there alone for many days. He would not eat anything at all, even berries. After sundown, he would drink a little water from a brook. He would sing the songs that his grandfather had taught him and repeat the ancient prayers of his people, so that his heart would be worthy of a Manitou. If he did all this, if he waited faithfully, someday, one day, his Manitou would come to him. Then he could go back to his village. He would have a new name. He would be a man and a hunter. Wow. What would it be like, this Manitou, Matt questioned. There was no way to know. Etienne told him. There was no way to know, Etienne told him. It could come in many ways. In a dream, he might see a bird or an animal or even a tree. He might not see anything at all. Instead, he might hear a voice speaking to him. There would be no mistake. When the Manitou came, Etienne would recognize that it was meant for him. What if the Manitou should not come? Matt asked. Instantly, Matt was ashamed of his question. A dark shadow had crossed Etienne's face. There was something in his eyes that Matt had never seen there before. Sadness and, more than that, fear. "I wait," Etienne said. "I wait until he come. I can never be hunter unless the Manitou come." Matt could think of nothing at all to say. He felt shut away from his friend in a way that even the boy's scorn had never even made him feel. This was something he could not understand or share. If he finds his Manitou, he thought, he will go with the men. He may never come here again. "You'll come back afterwards, won't you?" he asked anxiously, though he knew in his heart that it would never be the same. "I come back," Etienne promised. Waking in the nights that followed, Matt pulled the blanket tighter around his shoulders. It must be very cold in the forest. He could not get Etienne out of his mind. What would it be like, sitting in a shelter, just waiting, growing hungrier every day and more afraid? Because there was no doubt Etienne had been afraid. Matt was sure of that. Etienne was afraid he might fail, that he might have to return to the village and admit that his Manitou had not appeared. For Etienne, this would be the greatest of disgraces, a shame that must be terrible if the thought of it had ever brought fear into his eyes. Even though he dreaded that it would mean the end of all their adventures, Matt was hoping in the darkness that Etienne would find his Manitou. I want to talk to you a little bit about what this Manitou idea is, because I have had some friends of mine who have been Native, and even to this day, they practice the idea that you go through a change. You go through a change when you become a woman. You go through a change when you become a man. This is what anthropologists will call a rite of passage. A rite of passage is the time in your life where you reach a certain benchmark that everybody in your culture goes through. Some people might think it's a little bit like that you've earned your age and that you have received the education that you have earned moving from 5th grade to 6th grade in Georgia, at least, into middle school. But this is bigger than that. You heard this. This is a cultural, religious, spiritual journey that Etienne is on. Something that Matt doesn't understand because Matt's culture doesn't have it. And so, Matt is on the outside. The men in Etienne's tribe have all done this. It's Etienne's turn. So he holds close to his culture. He holds close to his pledges, his prayers, his songs, his people's stories. He has seen all the other men know that they have received their Manitou. And so now it's Etienne's turn. Women, I do believe, go through a very similar process. In many tribes, many Native tribes, many tribes throughout the rest of the world, when you become a man, when you become a woman, you take on a different name. You take on a different personality. Your families may have given you a particular name as a child. But this idea of Etienne going and seeking out his Manitou will help define who he is as a man. It must be very scary. Did you notice how it clued us in that Matt is pulling the covers over him? So it means that it's closer, it's colder. The weather is changing. It's no longer summertime. It's into the fall, and we're still waiting for Mom and Dad. And Etienne is out in the wilderness on his own, seeking his Manitou. And that's a pretty exciting place to stop, right? If you had your book, I'm sure some of you would say, wait a second, I'm going to probably read the next chapter. And that's okay. We have been committed to 2 chapters a day. And I want to thank you for being present with us. Being present with us as we learn more deeply about the relationship between Matt and Etienne. What is it that you wonder? That's my question. I want to know what you think. Write a comment or two below. I want you to be thinking about, what would your Manitou potentially be? Have you had this kind of experience before? And if you have, I'd love for you to share it with your friends. Talk to your families about rites of passage. Talk to your family about maybe something that your family does when you get to a certain age and you do something, because some families have that tradition. You don't have to be Native in order to have a rite of passage. You can be of any descent, of any cultural background. But what are those things that your family recognizes as being rites of passage? Sometimes I think that maybe one of the things that I do is I come out here into the wilderness, trying to learn more about it. You know what I mean? Trying to understand and trying to grasp what it means to be alive, and what it means to be here, and what it means to live amongst ponderosa pines. You know, as I've read today, something strange has occurred. You've probably noticed how windy it's been. But we had blue skies when we began, and it is at this point right now that I look up and I see nothing but gray skies. Now, it doesn't quite look like it's going to rain, but I should probably start heading back because I don't want to get stuck in a canyon and not know exactly where it is, especially when I'm wearing shorts. It's kind of chilly out here. I hope you have a great day. I hope that you take what you've learned today, what we've read about today, and build your own stories. I hope you have your own book that you read on your time, but I want to thank you, and I want to tell you that my reading wouldn't be the same without you. So thank you very much for being here. I hope you have a great afternoon. I hope you have a great day. Live life to the fullest, and without further ado, I love you. Now, get out.